Welcome to the Tree.Church Bible Study, where we are taking an in-depth look at the book of Ruth. And we're so glad that you are here with us. I am your host, Stacey, and I have Zach and Chris joining me today. All right, so I always like to know where people like to go to eat or how they like to spend their lunch hour. So what is your favorite lunch spot? Zach? I already know the
I was
answer.
going to say, I'm glad you started with me because I think Chris is going to be similar to mine. So I love the Well in Lancaster. I love the atmosphere. I love the people who own it. I love their coffee. I think I'm not a spokesman for this group, but I do think that they're the best coffee in town. But just love that environment. Somewhere I go every Friday, and my wife and I at least go once a week for lunch. So
Love
enjoy
it.
that place for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. If I'm going anywhere for lunch or for breakfast, it's typically where I'm going. For one, because I agree, the coffee is phenomenal, like my favorite coffee. And then I would say if you go by the place that I go most often though for lunch, either Kroger or the Tree.Church kitchen, because I have packed my lunch.
Same. The Tree.Church is where I eat my lunch
Yeah,
often.
that's right, yeah.
If I had my preference though, which I do have my preference. I mean, like I could, but I just
Stacey,
choose.
who's
I
not
just
letting you?
Yeah.
Who's not letting you? Who do
Got
we have
me
to have a
trapped
conversation?
here.
Who do we need to have a conversation with?
Like cadence.
Me? Yeah. I have always been a packer. Like always. Like
Yeah.
I've always packed my lunch. And so it is a rare occasion when it's like, oh, you went somewhere today. It's usually because I'm meeting like a core member or something like that. But honestly, now that it's officially open, I love Chick-fil-A, and my husband has brought it to me multiple times. And so I don't want to go there and eat it. I actually really want him to bring it to me, and we'll sit outside here at the church. And
So
eat
your
it
favorite lunch
together.
spot is still the
It's
Tree.Church.
still the Tree.Church.
That's right. That's right. But with good company. Tree.Church with good
With
company.
good food
The
and good
best
company.
company. I am a creature of habit. What can I say?
It's all right. It's all right.
I would second that. Chick-fil-A is great.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's all right.
It's all right.
It's fast food chicken.
Chris is rebelling, but it is great.
It's fine. I do love the Well too.
Maybe one day I'll get saved.
Well, let's go into our Bible study.
Okay. All right.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Last week,
Fair.
we began our study of Ruth, and we just gave a lot of background information because it is important. It's important to
Mhm.
know the historical context, maybe how to read the specific scriptures, and to understand a little bit more of what it is that we're going to study. And today we get to dive into the book, and I'm really excited. We're going to do very long 5 verses. That's it. All just 5 verses today, but a lot is jam-packed
Oh,
into
heck yeah.
these 5
Yeah.
verses. And so can't wait to dive into this, and we're going to begin to see the story of Naomi and Ruth, and what's going to happen for God's people.
Yep.
So we are in Ruth 1, picking up in verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. Her name is really easy to say.
His not so much.
Their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites. Is that right?
Ephrathites.
Thank you. From Bethlehem in the land of Judah. And when they reached Moab, they settled there. And I didn't do my fun little thing where I make sure that I have the pronunciation of each of those, but I don't think I did too bad this time.
Nailed it.
So let's talk some context again. We're going to be doing a lot of this throughout this book, but we talked a little bit about it last time. So we'll just maybe breeze over a little bit. This is the days of the judges, like it says, when the judges ruled, and they were not like kings, right? We talked
Right.
about that last
Right.
time, and that this was really a dark time. Everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes. Do you have anything to add, Chris?
Yeah, we talked about the judges ruling the land. And we talked about the negative side of it, and I think I said something about like there wasn't very many good ones. But then we forget about the last judge, Samuel, and
Yeah.
Samuel kind of
Yeah.
falls like within this time frame of what's going on. So you have think more like the judges. They're more like prophets raised up, and
Yeah.
like so they were just claimed to to either protect Israel, or they were there to bring God's word, or and honestly, that they were supposed to be these people who led the people of Israel into the worship of God, but for the most part, they did not. But yeah, so when you think of the judges, think the contrast of Samson and Samuel,
Yeah.
because it's the two starkest contrast of what the judges were in Israel at the time. So
This feels like a time of chaos.
it was. I mean,
not a time you would want to live.
No,
and think about it. We think of nation states now of like we think of like the United States, and we think of like Canada, and we think of like Great Britain and Europe, and like we think of all these things as like defined nation states. These were tribes.
Yeah,
these were
that's
groups
true.
of people that they ended up being in constant conflict with each other. So if you lived within a city, you had a leg up because you had a protective wall around you. Otherwise, and what happened a lot of times is, and the story that happens in Judges, is you have the Philistines coming and burning crops. You know what I mean? And so like you have them coming and robbing and killing and pillaging and taking whole villages away. And so think more, the best way I could think about it is when you, and we, I think even as Westerners, we have a harder time understanding this, is Iraq, the country Iraq, it functions as a nation state, but really it's made up of multiple different tribes. And so when you hear about like civil wars, like it was more so through the 90s, early 2000s, we learned more about like the way in which they operated, and how there's tension between, I'm not going to nail these names, but the Shunnis and the and I can't remember the Sunnis. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. But so they still very much live in this like tribalistic like clan family like society. That's what this is. Like that's what is going on in Bible times. And so we just don't have context. It's not a nation state. It is 12 tribes operating amidst other tribes of people that were Canaanites, and it is chaos, like you said.
I think I love that though. I love that you gave us that explanation, because I do think it kind of helps us to reshape our minds, because we do more so think we're the United States of America. You know, like it's nothing at all like that. It is tribes.
It would be like if Lancaster was a tribe and Logan was a tribe, and like there was just constant like you know what I'm saying, like that's which
side I'd
just
be on.
do whatever you think is best, right? And each tribe's gonna be doing that
and
at all
times. That's exactly what they're doing.
That's what's happening right here.
And because of that, we talked about this. There's a famine in the land. So you have, I love how when it first talks about, did I say his name right? Elimelech? It's close enough.
What Chris said.
You say potato, I say potato.
No, Stacey. We say
potato.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
A certain man from Bethlehem. So I love that that's how they describe him. You know, like it's just funny to me. Yet again, that's the tribe he comes from.
Right.
But he is a member of God's people. But because of the famine, he takes his family to Moab. So they're going to go on this journey to Moab. And something that I found interesting was, I think so many times when I've read this, I think that I've thought like, well, they were just going to settle there for the rest of their lives. But because of the way that it was phrased, it's a good possibility that they had intention to return at some point, that they were sojourners, you know, that this was just like a reprieve from the famine, and that it was in hopes of returning at some point. So that was interesting, because I think so many times I've read this and I've just been like, oh, they're just abandoning their people, never to come back, which we're going to see Naomi eventually does. But I just thought that was just really interesting.
I don't remember if it's here or if it's in one of the passages coming up. It does talk about like they end up staying like 10 years, I think is the time that they're there.
Yeah.
So they do sojourn, but they probably sojourn longer than they think that they're they're planning to. The thing with this whole scene is we need to let it draw pictures of other Bible stories to our mind as well. So where's another place where a famine happens in the land and a family sojourns out of and goes somewhere else?
I'm trying to think.
It's pop quiz. So I'm gonna put you guys on the spot.
No.
We're doing great.
Yeah, we're not doing very well, Chris.
Sorry.
Why don't you tell us, Chris?
Go back to Genesis. It's
happened a lot in Genesis.
Yeah. It's Jacob. Jacob takes his family down to Israel, and they end up
Mm.
staying or Israel, shoot, Egypt, and they end up staying longer than they intend, and you know what I mean. And so
Mm.
like this story harkens back to that story in Genesis where God's people goes looking for help in another foreign nation and
Mhm.
um, ends up running into trouble while they're
Yeah.
there. You know what I mean? It's also this place where like we're going to talk about names later and how that plays a role, but the name Bethlehem, the city name of Bethlehem, is literally house of bread.
Mm.
Mm.
People are starving in the house of bread, so you get this contrasting
Yeah.
portion of like all this stuff going on where the famine has hit this place that's supposed to be a place of blessing,
Mm.
and so they go to this land, to Moab, which is one of the remaining um, Canaanite tribes that have
Mm.
kind of been dispossessed and pushed out of the promised land. So they live on if you think about I think it's the Dead Sea, maybe it's the Sea of Galilee. I need to pull my map up here.
Hmm.
I'm gonna pull my map up real quick. Um, and I just need to zoom in a little bit, but like I'm pretty sure it's the Dead Sea. Yep, it's the Dead Sea. So they're just on the other side of the Dead Sea, and so they live as neighbors to the people of God,
Mhm.
but they're not part of the tribes, and so
Mhm.
um, they're more like distant cousins
Mhm.
to the Israelites
Yeah.
than they are anything. But
Mhm.
they're problematic because do you guys remember the story of Balaam and the donkey?
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had something I wanted to say, and I don't know that is appropriate for me to say.
Well, we're here,
Yeah,
so
Zach, you're supposed to be a better influence in this.
I'm being
So
mentored by
the
you.
Moabites, they do not bless Israel, and they're like when Israel comes to take the land of the promised land, they end up actually hiring Balaam to curse the nation of Israel,
Hmm.
and Balaam's
Mhm.
donkey like he's a smart donkey. I'll just say it that way.
I
I'm-
knew that that's where you were going with this.
He saw the angel. He was aware of what God was doing.
Yeah.
And Balaam ends up being like, you hired me to curse the nation of Israel. I can't do it because God won't let me do it. And so,
I love
but
that.
the Israelites forever are enemies of Moab because of
Mm.
that story. Because of,
Mm.
and so they're sojourning not just to a place that's like benign. This draws up a place in mind of enemy,
Mm.
a place of somewhere they should not be.
Mhm.
And so, yeah. I think that's what you asked me. I've talked so long I can't remember the
That's
question.
okay. That's okay. I
So
actually I do have a fun fact, and I hope it's true. But I was listening to a podcast where they dive into theological things, and they were saying that the Moabites started from incest, from Lot
okay, yeah,
and his daughters. If you don't know the story,
Stacey, that's the grossest fun fact. That
I know. See, I'm really learning a lot. But I think it can give context
Yeah,
to it when you really
yeah,
think about how they started. They don't give blessing to God's people.
Mhm.
They're opposed to God's people
yeah,
essentially. And then to sit here and to think, okay, well now this guy and his family are going to
Going back.
go
Yeah.
there to seek out shelter, to seek out food, to seek out salvation,
Right.
yeah,
essentially.
Right.
yeah.
And so I do want to talk about that though, because I think it's so easy for us to look at them and to judge them. Uh, what do you think you would do in this situation, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, this is like, I mean, desperate times call for desperate measures. But
Hmm.
you think about this. I mean, no food. Your family is depending upon you. I think that we a lot of times we'll read scripture and we'll judge it from afar as if like, why did they not know better? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I mean, you've seen the hand of God through your life and how He's always been there and been faithful to you. But we do it in our own lives. You know, we've
Mm.
seen the hand of God in our own lives, and so it's just I would probably have done the same thing. You know, I have a
Mm.
family who needs to be fed and needs to be able to have shelter and things like that. It's like I have to go to these places so that
Yeah.
I can do the best for my family.
Mm.
And so I would imagine that if this was the decision I had to make, I would have probably follow suit of exactly what he was doing with his family at this
Mm.
time. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think this beautifully paints a picture of the complexity of our ethics and our
Mm.
moral life, and
Mm.
even how God sets up what is the ideal path to go and what is the reality
hmm
in which we live, and God leaves space. Like the author's not going to comment on whether this was a good choice or a bad choice.
Yeah.
hmm
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And so like it's hard for me to come and say like, man, there's a whole lot of things that point to this being a bad choice.
Hmm.
And so I would try to find a way around it. You know what I mean? And like, and not have to do it that way. And even the commentaries I read are all speaking to this place of like, was the expectation that Elimelech looked for other options? Like, are there other ways in which he could have been faithful and done what you said? Like, I think you're right on. Like, the practical thing is like, we go where the food is.
Yeah.
And we find the closest, nearest, and most convenient way to find food. We find that Chick-fil-A.
That's right.
So we can take care of our
Yeah, we
family.
do.
You know
That's
what I mean? Even though it's terrible chicken. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. Sorry. Do not email me,
Yeah,
please.
the ratings of the
If you-
podcast just
yeah.
went down, Chris.
Please do not email me.
Don't worry, we're
just
still
my
friends.
preference. So,
That's right. We still love Chris.
anyhow, but what I'm saying is like he did the thing that was convenient.
Yeah.
And provincial in that moment, but the text leaves it up in the air.
Yeah.
Whether it was the right thing to do or not. And you're right, Stacey. I don't know that this is their fault that there's a famine in the land. It's the people of Israel, the collective. They have rejected God, and they're giving themselves to idol worship, failing to do the things, and now they're stuck to deal with this very complex situation where do we eat? Do we? But then you go to the time of the kings and you look at the stories where they compromise, and you look at the stories where they make these choices out of convenience, out of what looks like necessity, such as like giving allegiance to Assyria, giving allegiance to Egypt, giving allegiance and asking them to be their allies and fight for them. That is like, that's compromise, like city. That's like, you have failed as a king because you have walked the people of God away from their dependence on God. And so like, we're left to live in this tension of what do we do? So what would I do in this situation? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's complex and complicated. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
so
I honestly don't have an answer for it either, because I am such a planned out, organized person that I would almost be tempted the same thing of like, well, what we're doing right now isn't working, so I better take matters into my own hands. And you know, and I like how you even said it might not have even been this like maybe this family was legitimately being obedient to God. I tell my daughter this all the time. Isn't it unfortunate that one person can cause trouble for everyone in the class, you know? I mean, there could have been people, there probably were people, God's people, that were still trying to walk out in obedience, but sometimes the ones that aren't, it's like, God's like, well, there are consequences to your actions. And this is what they're experiencing in this moment. Yeah. So I don't know what I would do either, but it helps me to not judge them so much.
Well, and we're not meant to judge. I don't think the story is going to lend towards judging their right decision or wrong decision. What it's meant to do is to stir that question mark in us. It's meant to expose like, where would we fall, and how does that hit with like God's ideal? You know what I mean? Like, it's meant to make us uncomfortable and put us in the place where we go, wow, man, I don't know, because the practical thing often feels like the right thing, and God often gives us wisdom and logic to be able to, like Zach, I loved what you said. Like, I would want to take care of my family. God's called me to take care of my family, so I'm gonna go do the thing that God's called me to do. But like, it's meant to stir up in us, like, to what ends justify what means. You know what I mean? And so like, it's raising that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we dive into the next part of what happens, I would like to talk about names, because names have a lot, not that names don't have meaning today, but names had a lot more meaning at this time. Wouldn't you agree? Like they really put a lot of thought and effort into their names. So we're introduced to, can you say his name for me one more time? Elimelech. Okay. And his name means my God is king, is what I read. Then we have Naomi, which means sweet or pleasant. And I love that. And then they have two sons, and you're going to see why this is interesting here as we continue on in our reading. It's like the mom and dad, man, they have great names.
That's right. The meaning of their names.
They're not as bad as what Hosea names his kids. So we'll just say that.
If you know that story, it makes sense. So we have Malon, great infirmity, a sick person, painful, sickly, weak. How'd you like that for a name? Or Kilion, wasting, pining, or sick. So one last question before we kind of see, we're laughing. And if you haven't read, which I hope you have, because we encouraged you last time to make sure you read ahead of time, because their names are going to really mean something
It's
here
gonna
when we
all
get to
come
these
true.
next passages. But why were names important? Why is it an important part of biblical?
Yeah, I mean, from what I've read, it almost speaks to the person's, almost like prophetic, what the person's character would be,
Mm,
or what they would be doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think and I love how even in the Bible, when God changes someone's life in the Bible, I'm thinking of Abram and Sarai, which then turns into Abraham and Sarah. You know what I mean?
mhm,
When he changes, or we look at Saul, and then he changes Saul's name to Paul. You know what I mean? When he makes that transformation of what those people are. And so I think that, like you said, back then their names had a whole lot more meaning than they have. Like
mhm.
we go and we like, that's a cute name for our kid, so we'll name our kid that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Back
Yeah.
then it was almost like this is who your kid or who that person is going to become. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It's
Yeah.
how I guess how I read
mm,
it. So
mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And so like it was at least in the narrative aspect, we'll say it that way. Like
yes,
it
Mm,
was like
yeah.
predictive.
Hmm.
And so this was a tool in the Hebrew narrative that's often used, though it's used differently here. Like normally names are given before the action
hmm
and that it's going to describe what's going to happen.
Hmm.
Here, the action is going to be described before the definition of their names are given.
Okay.
And so what's going on here is the narrator is giving us some information, and the writer of the book is telling us some things about these people. And I think you're right, Zach. It does indicate and it pushes along their character in the
Mm,
story.
mhm.
So like Elimelech is my God, my
My
God
God
is
is
king,
king.
hmm
Mhm.
my God is king. But the way he behaves, the what's assumed and what's kind of put forth is Elimelech uh, doesn't act that way.
Mm.
hmm
And so
Yeah.
like, and then Naomi, we're gonna find out she actually has her name changed. Like she's
Mhm.
like, call me Mara,
Yeah.
yeah,
like
yeah.
because I'm bitter. You know what
Right.
I mean? So
hmm
like she recognizes the tension in that like her name is the opposite. And so like what starts as a place of blessing for these people and a place of like obedience or name reflecting them is going to turn into something that
Mm.
is yeah, like almost the opposite of what happened. So they're antithetical here.
Hmm.
Same, but except for the kids, because the boys are going to, we're going to find out, the boys are going to live
Here
up to their
shortly.
names.
Yeah,
So,
they
Yeah,
really
yeah, for
are.
sure.
but even that, like they said, sometimes Hebrews would name their children in the circumstances surrounding the child's birth. So it could have been that they were born and they were sickly
Mm,
babies, like you know
mhm.
what I mean, like
hmm
they didn't thrive right
Mm.
away, and so
Yeah.
like they could have been given that name. So but for our purposes and for our understanding, it's a narrative device
Mm.
to help us understand the story and who those people are in the story. So we got to pay attention to how are those characters living up to their name, or are they living like in contrast to their
Sure.
name?
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
how what is the author trying to do by
Yeah.
telling us these things?
Yeah. Well,
So
let's see what happens to him.
awesome.
Let's pick up in verse 3. Then
Elimelech.
Elimelech. I see. I keep wanting to go to
Melech.
L.
So okay, Melech is king in
Elimelech.
Hebrew,
Oh, there we
and
go.
El is God. So God is my king.
I love it.
Elimelech.
Elimelech died, and Naomi was left with her 2 sons. The 2 sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named Orpah, and the other a woman named Ruth. But about 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chilion died. This left Naomi alone without her 2 sons or her husband. So that was why we were saying that. I mean, they did.
Yeah.
So now this is interesting. So her sons marry Moabite women. And so let's unpack this for a second, because I think this is super important. They're not Jewish women. They're not
No.
Right.
women. And this was a command yet again that God had told them not to do, not to
hmm
marry outside of his people.
Yeah.
And so they marry among pagan nations, and they're married to these Moabite women. And I think that is important, because we're going to see how this plays out throughout the story.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, because we were kind of already talking about, were they being obedient to God? Were they not being obedient to God? Well, this clearly shows that they weren't. But yet again, if you're in Moab and you're of that age, you're probably going to marry Moabite women, right?
Yeah.
hmm
Well, we talked about like how long they stayed. They were there for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
If they were not planning to do that, they would not have. But the question is raised, like, why didn't they go back
Yeah.
when the boys came of age to be married? Why
Mhm.
wouldn't they go back
Yeah.
and take uh, Israelite women as wives for their sons?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so there's a whole lot going on here, like you said, Stace, that it's controversial. It stirs the
Mm.
like, and some scholars even think that like this is depending on the dating of this, what is meant by the fact that they took Moabite women was, and what God is going to do through the particularly Ruth,
Mm-hmm.
that it's a critique of Ezra and Nehemiah's such strict commanding
Mm-hmm.
of the forbidden intermarriage.
Yeah.
And so like in what I would take in that from that is not that it's countering what Ezra and Nehemiah focused on, because that was a part of the reason why they were exiled in the first place. They disobeyed
Mm-hmm.
God's law, so they were exiled. When Ezra and Nehemiah bring the people back, they are so like hyper stringent on like, we're not doing that again.
Mm-hmm.
Like anything that would cause us to go into exile again, like we will stay 1,000 yards from it. And that
Mm-hmm.
seems like wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
except what you get at times is legalism in it.
Hmm.
And you get what will stem out of like what will become like the pharisaical mindset in the New Testament. Like
Mm-hmm.
you start to see that like if we do the slightest thing, like we're going to be exiled again. And yet at the same time, the heart and ability for God to move is lost
Yeah.
in it. And so like that's where like I think that's the tension that's being raised by this entire book. That's the tension that is being raised by them taking,
Yeah.
they're breaking God's law,
Yeah.
and yet
Right.
we're about to see what God's going to do with it.
Well, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
now we have 3 childless widows.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially where we're at now
Yeah.
in this moment, is that now we've got 3 women. Husbands have all passed away. They don't have any children. Why is this such a big deal? Do you have any thoughts behind that, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, they can't inherit. There's no inheritance for them. There's nothing. I mean, I don't think Israel had anything in place that when a widow, when a woman was a widow, how do we support that person at
Yeah.
that time? And so, honestly, this is devastating for this family. I
Mm.
mean, there's not one man who they can then go to and say, hey, this is who we can now get our inheritance from, or even some semblance of income or whatever. Because in
Mhm.
that time frame, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't. They didn't have that option. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So.
no, you're not wrong.
No.
There's not really a great welfare system that's being enacted. Like, you know what I mean? And so like, it's not a state run
Mhm.
welfare
Yeah.
system. There are things God put in place. So like, we're going to learn about things such as gleaning. That is a like a
Yeah.
Sure.
system of welfare
Type of
Right.
to care for the poor and for
Mhm.
the destitute. But you're right, Zach. Like, Naomi is in a tough place because one, she's not young enough to really find someone to remarry.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And two, the girls probably would not be first choice for a wife because of the focus on virginity and like how much that was valued by
Mhm.
society. And so
Yeah.
like
Right.
not only are they not virgins any longer, they're also they haven't bore any children. So the
Yeah.
question mark remains: is Orpah and Ruth, are they barren,
Hmm.
or was it because of the boys? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
were they barren or
Right.
unable to cause conception? And so like there's question marks here of like what could happen. What's unique though is Ruth and Orpah. Ruth becomes a Ruth's an orphan essentially.
Mm.
And so what you see here is you see a beginning to tie together that grouping
Mm.
of widow orphan. So now you have widow, orphan,
Yeah.
foreigner, and you start
Mhm.
to see this theme
Mm.
play out of the main central characters
Right.
are people that would have been looked down upon, forgotten, overlooked, neglected by society,
Mm.
not considered to be blessed by God.
Mhm.
And so that those are what's taking shape as the central figure
Mhm.
here in this story, which is contrary. It's so contrasting to
Mm.
what would have been considered blessed by God.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Well, I want to make sure that we get to a little practical application as we kind of close out this.
No practical
But
application.
yes,
I'm just
practical
kidding.
Yeah.
application.
Only facts.
I'm the
Only
host.
facts.
Only data.
And what I think I said this earlier, kind of as I was reading my commentary, is that I said, this is one of those, is the grass greener on the other side type of things. And we don't know where the gentleman passing away, was that consequences of their actions? Was this just another part of God's
Yeah.
sovereign plan. And so I wanted to just talk about, when was a time that you took matters into your own hands? Either you were like, the grass is greener on the other side, God's not working as fastly as I would want him to, any of those above. And what happened? What
Yeah.
happened in that moment? And how can we point people to make decisions to walk in obedience to God?
Yeah. Yeah, I can go first. I had a situation where I was in a job where I love this job. It was honestly like an 8 to 5 job. It
Mm,
was just almost perfect for, like, I had small kids at the time, and they actually approached me about a potential promotion. And the amount of money that they were willing to give was just so big that it was almost blinding. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all the decisions, like, why would I not do this? But counting that cost, like, I looked at it and I was like, I think that, I'm going to increase by this many hours per week, or, I know that that's going to put a little bit of strain on my family life, my
Hmm.
wife. But I, without even praying about it, accepted this. I mean, Karen and I kind of
mm,
talked about it, and honestly, when we made the decision, it was just like, we did that. That was like the last thing we would have done. Would have been prayed. It was like, obviously this is God, because this is
mm,
just so much money, and just a substantial increase. But when I got into that job, I began to work 70, 60, 70, 80 hours a
mm,
week. You know what I mean? Where it was just, I did not have time. I was going to work before my kids were coming out of bed. I was getting home after they were already put back in bed.
mm,
Kara was ready to go to bed. And so honestly, that's where what happened. And
mm,
honestly, that I got to the point where I was like, why? This was not what I had expected this to be. I thought that this was going to be a financial blessing. As the husband, I wanted to be able to support my wife and my family and
Hmm.
all of this. And really, like, I had to make the decision. And honestly, it put some strain on Karen and I's relationship. She's great. But she was being a single mother, essentially.
mm,
Yeah.
And I was like, I do not want this for our life. You know what I mean?
mm,
And my kids were at just an impressionable age where I was like, I want to make sure I'm spending time with them.
mm,
I didn't even stay in that job for a year. I honestly called an
Hmm.
old vice president of mine, and I said, hey, I would love to come back to work if there's an availability for you. And praise God, within a month, I was back in that job working eight
mm,
to five. But in that moment, I mean, God, I really struggled. I struggled
mm.
physically. Like, I was
Yeah.
the most physically unhealthy that I've ever been in, that I can recall in my life.
Mm,
Yeah.
Mentally was even worse. You know what I mean?
mm,
Because I wasn't there to be with my family. I was basically 12 to 15 hours a day hanging out with the people who I worked with. And so,
mm,
but by the grace of God, I got another job and was able to be back. And I took a 60 to 65% pay cut. And you know what? I never missed a dollar because I got my life
mm.
back, is what it felt
Yeah.
like. And so,
Wow.
sometimes we can just be so blinded by these
Mm,
things. And again, I did not consult God. I didn't ask him what he thought. I just kind of took this on my own, and I thought, man, I will never, lesson learned, never do
mm.
that again.
Yeah.
Like, always take these
Wow.
bigger decisions like this to God in those
What a
times. So,
powerful story. Thanks
yeah,
for
Yeah.
sharing that,
yeah.
Zach. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm in a fairly similar place, like, or fairly have a fairly similar story to that. Like, mine was, I started working in juvenile court for a while, and I was in the clerk's office, and I'd always, when I got hired working there, I wanted to work in probation. I wanted to work, like, with the kids in that way, like in the probation office, and the opportunity just never came. So I was a clerk for like 2.5 years, and then finally an opportunity came. And, like, I did the same thing. Like, I just kind of jumped at it. I'm like, this is my in. Like, I'll be able to do probation. And but the problem was, it wasn't a probation officer position. It was surveillance. And so
Mm,
essentially what that means is I was just responsible for going and making sure kids were on house arrest. The kids who were on house arrest, they were home, making sure, like, if kids needed to do drug tests, I would drug test them, like, do those types of things. But it was all like, Tuesday through Saturday, 2 to 11 p.m., like, second
Mm,
shift.
mm,
And, like, it turned into, like, one of the most depressive
mm.
states of my life. Like,
Yeah.
I was by myself all the time. I left, like, usually about 12 o'clock. I would start getting ready for work, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. But I'd sleep till like 10 o'clock, because I'd get home at
Mm.
11, stay
Yeah.
up till 2 or 3 in the morning, because I wasn't tired and I didn't have a day.
mm-hmm.
and
Mm.
and so, like, missed all the weekend family stuff, was never home.
Yeah.
The only thing that was a benefit of it is that I was able to stay up late at night with Hannah, because Hannah was just born at the time.
Mm.
Which, to tell you how long ago that was, my daughter's 18 now, so
Crazy.
it's crazy. Don't blink, anybody. Anyhow, but in that season, like, I lost my ability to serve at church. I lost.
Mm.
I was in karate at the time. I lost my ability to do that, like, all because I made this choice. But at the same time, and I think this fits really well with the story of Ruth and Naomi. So I made that decision, did that, probably the worst season of my life. At the same time, it's what triggered me to go like, you know what, like I want to do ministry. I want to try something different. I'm going to go, I'm going to do ministry. And that triggered me to take the step to go ask Matthew if I could be an intern. And like that, it kind of was the thing that catapulted me into where I am today. And so like what was the worst season of my life turned out to be the best. But in that season, because I made that choice, and I was the same as you, Zach, I didn't pray about it. Like I didn't like, that wasn't like a front facing concern for me. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so like, I just jumped into it, thought it was going to be my next step to my next thing. And sure enough, it was just not the way that I expected it to be. And had to go through a lot of pain and struggle because of it.
Sure.
I don't necessarily have a story like either one of you, but as I was just thinking about how I put this question of like, when have you taken matters into your own hands? All the time. That's my answer. All the time. I mean, we can joke about it, but mine is more so on the side of like, I think about them and I wonder if they had just waited out the famine, what would have been different? And I know seasons of waiting are the ones that are hard for me. Those are the ones where God, because I'm like, okay, God, hurry up and tell me what it is I need to do in this season so that I can get to the other side of this. And that's just not at all how God works. You know, like God consistently is like, first of all, slow down, Stacey, you know, because I'm like, what do I need to do? And sometimes he's like, nothing. I just want you to sit here. And I can just tell you, when I try to take matters into my own hands, it never works out well, like at all. It never does. Like God's always like, well, now we have 4 additional lessons that we need to learn in this process, as opposed to just the one that I wanted you to learn. So, I mean, like I don't have like a big one, like I said, but this is a consistent thing for me where I just have to, I like to have control or the illusion of control. And it is consistently like, okay, God, this isn't for me to figure out. I have to sit here and be in your presence and allow you to work in this situation.
I 100% think God wants us to be faithful and trusting him in the way that you're just talking about. Like, I believe that to be true with all that I am.
Yeah.
But I think we have to be careful that we don't overemphasize like the nature of like the way in which God works. And I think the point of this story is like, I think sometimes we think we can systematize that. If I just do the right thing all the time, like then my life will be free of pain. You know what I mean? Like we almost flip it to like, if I could just be obedient to God and if I'm just doing the right thing that God wants me to do all the time, then God will bless me and God will, like, my life will go smooth. Things will, I won't have those seasons where we have to wrestle and we have the turmoil. But I don't think that's the point. Like,
no, not at all.
The reality is we could be obedient to God in every step of the way, and it's still going to be difficult. It's still going to be, though it'd be better. You know what I'm saying? Like there is that reality to it. Like it would be better for us to trust God, because what does that demonstrate? It demonstrates that we're faithful. It demonstrates that we really are trusting ourselves to God. But the path of our life and the suffering that we face and the outcomes that we call blessings, we're going to see we talked about it earlier. That's up to God's sovereignty.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Thinking about my story, thinking about your story, like we learned lessons in those seasons and God was still shaping and doing something different in our lives. You know what I mean? And he still accomplished it through our poor choices. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think we have to be careful that we don't look at like obedience as this, like, I'm putting my coin of obedience in so that I get my blessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like, because the term is retributive justice. If I do the right thing all the time, I won't face poor consequences. And
that's not life.
That's not life. And that's not the book of Ruth.
I was going to say, at that point, it's bribery, right? I mean,
exactly,
and it's almost like the kid's mentality. I have both my kids ask me all the time, Dad, if I do this, what will I get in return? You know what I mean? Because we have to be careful of that, because obedience, there is reward in obedience.
100%.
But you know, sometimes that reward is God changing our heart. You know what I mean?
100%.
And so making us more like him. And let's just be honest, that's never easy. That is not something that we want. Our human nature pulls against that. And so when he's asking us to do this, it is for our good. It is for what he wants us to do in our life. But it is not an easy path. And typically, like we've talked about many times on the podcast, when God's calling you into something, those steps of faith are super tough. And so like that is something that he's calling you out of, that, I mean, again, steps of faith, something you don't know the outcome of. And so that's tough.
And to wrap it up, the beauty of this story, as we're going to see, is that God can use any part of our lives
Yes.
Mhm.
for redemption and for
Amen.
his glory.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
as we close today, Zach, will you pray for us?
I will. Lord, we just we thank you for your word, God. We thank you that we are able to gather around this table every week and just be able to dive deeper into this, God. And Lord, I know that as we are humans, Lord, we make decisions every single day, many of those, God. And as we make those decisions, God, a lot of times, as we just talked about, we don't consult you, God. We don't look at, Lord, what is your will for this? But Lord, if anybody is listening to this podcast now and they're walking through these kind of things where they want to take matters into their own hands, God, help them to release that. Help them to release that control to you, God, because what you want is so much greater, Lord, than what our human minds and hearts can see, God, in front of us. And so, Lord, I just pray that every day, Lord, that we would just be taking those steps of obedience. And one of those, God, is to give you control of our lives, God. And that is honestly the hardest part of this, is to give up that control, because, God, as Stacey said, we have this false sense of security that we can control this, God, and that is just not simply the case. And so help us every step of the way to be obedient to you. And God, we ask for your strength to be able to do that, God, because we can't do it on our strength. And so we surrender that to you.
Yes,
God, I thank you for who you are. I thank you for your son, Jesus. I thank you for just being able to sit around here and talk with these pastors, God, about your word and God, just your redemption plan, as we're going to see this whole thing play out, and how you had a purpose for the people who are in this story, but even for us today. And it's in your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you both so much. What a great way to kick off the actual story of Ruth. It was so good.
Yeah.
And thank you all for taking the time to listen. Make sure that you check out those show notes for deeper study. Interact with us on the discussion board, and like and share and subscribe so that other people can enjoy and learn more about this beautiful story of Ruth. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you'll join us next time.